5 damage for 1 mana is exactly what you get when you cast Thunderous Wrath for its miracle cost, and other Pauper cards like Brainstorm are perfect to set up this combo. Otherwise, you can use Consider, Dot Scour, and Mental Note to send it to the graveyard to later return it to the top of your library with Bloodwater Entity, Deep Analysis for card advantage, Counterspell to control the game, and Lightning Bolt as an efficient removal are other cards that fit perfectly in a deck built around Thunderous Wrath. And of course, Tolarian Terror is a must-have in any blue-based control deck. Let's see how this Pauper Brew does against the meta. Our first match is against Burn. We start with a decent hand of 6 and play a tap land. Our opponent starts strong with a Voldaren Epicure followed by a Monastery Swiftspear. We try to kill the Swiftspear, but our opponent uses Mutagenic Growth to protect it and deal more damage to us. We play a Tolarian Terror to hold our ground, and after casting a few spells, we manage to get rid of one of their Swiftspears. However, we need to find answers quickly as we only have 9 life, and our only board wipe is already in the graveyard. We block one of the vampires, and a Brainstorm from the top helps us to set up our hand, putting Thunderous Wrath back on top of our library. With the help of a Bloodwater Entity, we can put our board wipe on top and keep a removal spell ready. Our opponents find a burn spell, bringing us down to 4 life points, then down to 2 thanks to the Sublate Scamp ability. We clean the board and attack, putting our opponent on a 2-turn clock. They play a Synthesizer and cast a spell, but with Thunderous Wrath and a Lightning Bolt in hand, we manage to steal the game number 1. After sideboarding, 4 Hydroblast and a blue Elemental Blast should be enough to counter a deck full of red spells. However, our opponent started strong by dealing 4 damage on their first turn. To prevent further damage, I decided to kill the creature on their turn. I then played a land and pass, and our opponent cast another creature, but I waited before killing it as I preferred to use Lightning Bolt instead of a Hydroblast. Unfortunately, my opponent used Mutagenic Growth to protect their creature, so I had to use Hydroblast after all. Despite this setback, I am in a good position as I used fewer cards than them, and now a Tolarian Terror is ready to pressure their life total on an empty board. Our opponent plays a vampire and passes, while I reveal a Thunderous Wrath that will deal a lot of damage to them. Along with the Tolarian Terror attack, we deliver a 10 damage hit this turn, with counter backup in case of any unexpected events. Finally, our opponent cracks their Synthesizer, creates a token and passes, eventually conceding. In the second match, I was up against Mono Black Infect Storm deck. In the early game, we both focused on setting up our boards, with me trying to get my Tolarian Terrors out, while my opponent searched for their pieces to storm off in 1 turn. When I saw my opponent discard a Vraska's Fall, I decided to wait until I had enough mana to cast 2 Terrors with counter spell backup. However, we ended up in a staring contest until I could develop my board. Eventually, my opponent started casting their ritual spells to a large quantities of mana until they revealed their Creep Rats. I countered the first one, but to my surprise, they had a second one. Before clearing the board, they decided to give it Infect, and I had really questions about what would happen if they activated a rat with X equal 10. If you know the answer, let me know in the comments. Moving on to plan B, I decided to focus on a Bloodwater Entity, beatdown strategy. I played my first one and passed, putting a Brainstorm on top to craft my next turn along with the other entities. My opponent tried to draw 2 cards, but the spell was countered by a counterspell. I played my second entity, putting the counterspell on top, and with Brainstorm I put the counterspell back into my hand and attack on their turn. They play another card spell with the same result as the previous one, and now I could deal 3 damage to their face, pump my flyers, and cast a third entity to put the Lightning Bolt on top of my library in hopes of closing the game next turn. They couldn't find an answer, so we moved to the second game. In the second game, I had one Dispel post sideboard to stop my opponent's plans, and instant speed interaction. My hand was okay, but I didn't have any interaction with it. Like in the first game, we both focused on setting up before casting our finishers, with my opponent seeming stuck on mana and forced to make an early storm. They failed to find the right spells, so they just passed the turn. I found a Tolarian Terror, but decided to play the Bloodwater Entity that represented a little clock next turn, as the Thunderous Wrath combo has been assembled. They couldn't find an answer, so they just passed and I killed them on my turn. In the final match, I faced a mono Red Tron deck. I had a Brainstorm and a Thunderous Wrath in hand and decided to keep it. I needed to find a red source to set up the combo for my next turn while also representing counter magic. The game began with a 5 damage hit to my opponent for just 1 mana. Meanwhile, my opponent started to cast their loot spells in hope of finding their last Tron piece, with no luck so far. I seized the opportunity to resolve a Bloodwater Entity and eventually managed to put Thunderous Wrath on top of my library to deal another 5 damage while having a threat on the board. My opponent failed to find their last Tron piece and I put them into 10 with a 3-3 attacker. They play Lightning Axe to deal with my entity, but I played 3 spells and the entity could survive. However, I made a mistake by not considering that they had a second burn spell to finish off my entity. Despite that, I was still in a good spot, and after casting a Tolarian Terror, I won the game. For the second game, I added 4 Hydroblast and a blue Elemental Blast, and a Dispel Cyber. I kept a hand with a combo of Brainstorm and a Thunderous Wrath, and they found all Tron pieces and started casting their big spells. They revealed a boarding party, but I luckily found an answer for it and proceeded to cast a Tolarian Terror while drawing more cards. They played a Chump Blocker and looted through their deck, hoping to find a big spell for their next turn. I decided to put a Thunderous Wrath on top and attack with the Tolarian Terror while holding the spell, just in case. They went for a Lightning Bolt to my entity, but I let it die since I feared I had Lightning Axe for my big snake. They punished me by casting a boarding party and putting me in range of 2 Lightning Bolts. I decided it was worth killing the boarding party with the Thunderous Wrath, so I did that and also attacked with my Serpent. Since they discarded a card, countering the big score with the Dispel was worth doing. And on my turn, I set up a Thunderous Wrath combo again with my Bloodwater entity, while holding the counter spell. My opponent went for the double Lightning Bolt play, but I countered the last one, giving me the win for the match.
Now, if you're new to Pauper and want to test other cool decks, click into that playlist. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.